So we're going to kick it off into the climate advocacy panel, and I have the privilege of moderating that discussion. So I'm going to ask the following people to join me up at the stage. Can we get Edric, guys, from the Citizens Climate Lobby? Yay, Edric! Can we get Sherry Lear from 350 Southland? Yeah, Sherry! Can we get Hannah Yang, who's a student at Harvard Westlake and the chair of the LA Climate Reality Project. And, I don't know what she is it Kana or Kana? Kana, perfect. Kana McHugh from Redondo Union High School. You're a sophomore and a sustainability advocate. Thank you, Kana. Okay. I'm going to do like a hot second introduction so that we can hear from y'all. So Edric, where you go? In the black sweatshirt, is a partner with Vireo Energy and lives and works in El Segundo. He's a graduate of University of Michigan Duluth and a volunteer group leader with the South Bay LA chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby, CCL for short, in case I drop that acronym. Citizens Climate Lobby is a nonpartisan organization and has 514 chapters worldwide. My goodness. In the US, there's a focus on building political will for climate solutions in Congress. All right, then we got Kana McHugh. Kana is a sophomore at Redondo Union High School. She's interested in topics that include sustainable food and agriculture. Ooh, we got to talk later. Conservation, and leading by example. At Adams Middle School, she was involved in a school project that focused on sustainable produce and school gardens. Her grandmother exposed her to sustainable farming at a young age, and her interests include law and international work. Next we have, scrolling down, Sherry. Sherry is an organizer with the 350 South Bay LA project, and a practicing attorney and mother to a teenage boy. Sherry, yay, applause for that. Sherry grew up in Illinois and moved to California for law school. While at UCLA Law, she took part in a food drive to send supplies to the Navajo sheep herders facing extinction from Big Mountain by the coal industry. Wow, thank you for that incredible groundbreaking work. And then, okay, and then Cara King. Hold on, today. No, Hannah. I don't see her. There we go. Okay, Hannah is a high school student. Sorry, my bad. Thank you all for your patience. Hannah is a high school student from Harvard Westlake. Having been with the Climate Reality Project for about 2 years, she's participated in various activities, including the Green Schools campaign. She's now chairing the Youth Climate Action Network, which is being revived. Hannah is also a current member of the LA Zoo Teen Council for Conservation and the Metro Youth Council, both of which focus on sustainability and climate-related problems. In her free time, Hannah enjoys writing poetry and listening to R&B music. Very cool. Welcome, panelists. I'm going to start off with a really basic question. Can you share some experiences with a recent advocacy campaign that you all have worked on, and why was that campaign particularly important to you?
All right, so I worked on this project at my middle school. This is like the largest, most recent project that I've worked on, and it started out as just a school project, but then it became more than that. We were focused on, we were given a task to find a different catering system for our school lunches, because they weren't sustainable and they weren't adequate for the students at our school. They weren't nourishing, and we all knew that there was a better way. So we were instructed to present presentations. We sent out various surveys to the whole school, and we had them fill out different things that they'd be interested in, what they're focused on in their meals, and kind of help cater that towards the different companies which we then contacted. We contacted numerous companies, reached out to them, asked for samples of what they serve, how their food is sourced, and then we kind of went from there and did a deeper dive. And I was really moved by this experience because it kind of helped me to, it was like a big hands-on project that I got to see deeper into how this affects our world and just how one thing could look like it's okay, but we can do so much better than that.
So my name's Hannah, and there are two experiences I would like to touch upon. The first is, the first has to do with me being a part of the LA Zoo's Team Council for Conservation. So even though like the zoo is like called the zoo, it does a lot more than just like educate the public about animals. It does a lot of advocacy for climate and saving biodiversity. So as a part of each cohort, our like culminating keystone project is planning a youth conservation symposium. And at the Youth Conservation Symposium, the members of the Teen Council do a lot to help plan, find speakers, etc. And so this experience was really memorable for me because not only was I able to see tons of community members come together at this one event and learn in like the same room, but also it taught me a lot about planning events, especially climate-related events. And the second one is kind of like connected because I've been using my skills that I learned from planning the Conservation Symposium to power this project, and it's UCAN, or the Youth Climate Action Network, and it's something that I'm restarting at the LA chapter for Climate Reality. And basically it's just going to be like a place where you can congregate to talk about their projects at their schools that are related to climate advocacy and whatnot, and I'm very excited for it because I think it'll be like the first, it'll be the biggest project that I'll have taken on within this realm of climate advocacy. Thank you.
Okay, great to see everybody. My name is Edric Guys. I'm with Citizens Climate Lobby, and we're highlighting one particular activity that we're proud of recently, and so here it goes. We've been working with a difficult Congress now for many years. We're a nonpartisan group, so it's important for us to try to find common ground, and so that has actually happened, which doesn't really get into the public narrative very much, in limited ways. So to be clear, that's not going to be surprising for many of you, but more recently, there's been a focus on trade and international trade policy, and these tariffs are the things that we hear most about, but there's other policy initiatives beneath the surface that we were trying to pay attention to and get both folks on the left and the right side of the aisle, what we call the radical middle, where things get done many times, to pay attention, to pay more attention. So here we have, in the United States, there's a number of industries that are cleaner, albeit still in need of cleaning up, but cleaner than other industries throughout the world. So when you talk about those differences, products coming into our country that are made with more pollution than we would imbue in those products were we to make them here, then you are able to get some traction across the aisle, because this directly supports American job creation and American workers. So when you find that kind of common ground, the little light bulbs go off, and it's refreshing to see and feel as an activist. We don't always get to feel success, so we cherish those things. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sherry, and my environmental work for a number of years is focused on statewide advocacy in the area of statewide legislation and climate policy. I find it's, at least in California, where we have a super majority of one particular party, you at least have a chance of getting meaningful environmental legislation passed. But I will tell you, it's still very hard. There are many, many forces out there that are against the kind of change that we need to address what's happening to our climate. Recently, 350 Southbound Legislative Alliance, which is a regional group that focuses solely on legislation and climate policy, has been able to actually co-sponsor a piece of legislation that was introduced. And it's been introduced by Senator Henry Stern, who's up in LA, that area. He lost his home in the Woolsey fire. And the bill is called SB 500. That's the number that it's given. What it will do, and I'll try to explain this in plain English because it's a very wonky topic, is it will change the way that investor-owned utilities are allowed to charge rates to their customers. Right now, in the early 1900s, people were still drying their clothes on clotheslines, and some people didn't have electricity or didn't have lights and all that. The CPUC, California Public Utility Commission, wanted to encourage investor-owned utilities to build out transmission lines. And they did. And they're still encouraging them to build out transmission lines, except now they're building them over to Wyoming and Nevada. And quite frankly, that's one of the reasons why we're in a climate crisis. We should be putting solar panels on every building. We should be building microgrids. There's a lot of things that we could be doing, but our rate structure encourages investor-owned utilities to not do the right thing. So a friend of mine, her name is Cheryl Auger, worked with a team of experts in the energy sector, and they drafted legislation based on Hawaii's model, which is called performance-based review. So the utilities rates are based on how well they perform, and that's everything from how well they answer the phone to how well they're building resilience, which we clearly need in light of the wildfires. And this would be a major change in how utility bills are structured, because the investor-owned utilities have to get permission from the CPUC to do a rate change. And our rates have gone up hugely in the last few years. And as you can imagine, they're going to go up again now that we've had these fires and they're going to start building lines underground. It's very expensive. Not that I'm saying that's a bad thing. So that bill has been introduced, and this is the first bill that any California-based 350 group has been a sponsor on, and we have 3 co-sponsors, and we're working directly with Senator Stern's office. It's really amazing because just the whole process, you give them a bill, it's written a certain way, legislative council okays it, and then someone comes and rewrites it and it's a piece of junk. And then you have to fight for them, to get things back in, and then you're like, it's a little bit better, but it's not good enough. And then they, finally got something that is working, and that's, going to make some significant changes. So that's a pretty big deal. I'm really excited about it. Thanks.
It's like a microphone conga line. So from these 4 panelists, right, you heard Kana talk about investigating a very specific problem at your school and rallying your fellow classmates to push for more sustainable solutions. You heard Hannah emphasize the importance of planning and organizing events that can help draw in community to show just how many voices and people care about a particular issue. You heard Edric talk about the magnificence and the power of building bridges with voices who you may have not partnered with before, leveraging that for new communication opportunities. And you heard Sherry share a very specific example of a piece of legislation, a bill that has been drafted to fight climate change and affect our daily lives. So for all of the panelists, you all give very different examples of ways to be involved in legislation and in advocacy. I'm going to ask you to drill, but in a renewable energy way, drill into some more specifics. Like, what are some of the specific actions and tactics that you all used when developing your campaign, so that folks in this room can walk out knowing, like, what specific tools do they have at their disposal?
Well, I think especially as a student, just showing that like your voice matters at such a young age is really important. I feel like just showing, like, especially like going throughout the school, sending out these surveys, especially as this is when I was one of the upperclassmen, it really showed like the power and drive that you have and showing that you can make a difference in your community by sending out these surveys and showing, hey, by you giving us your feedback on this, you're helping us to make a difference. You might not be a part of this project directly, but by you sharing your voice, by simply answering these 5 questions, we can get a better idea of how we shape this program, how we can kind of reform this idea. And so I think just by kind of emphasizing the idea that like everyone's voice matters and just kind of sharing that like everyone's a part of this journey. It's not just the person whose name makes the headlines, but it's all the people who come together to sort of like create this plan and like contribute to this community is how it all comes together. And so I think that it's really important to realize that.
In your surveys, were you tabling at events? Were you emailing classmates to send out their surveys? Like, how did you get that survey out there?
Yeah, so we emailed a bunch of classmates. We had them forward it to other friends. We posted it across classrooms, like with the link displayed below, like, click this, help us out. It'll only take 5 minutes, and we kind of like in our emails gave like a snippet about what we were focused on and like how this would be beneficial. And then we were able to take all this data and kind of use that to sort of find what would be the best companies to help source our school's lunches.
So for me, regarding the Youth Conservation Symposium, one thing I did and I learned was that you have to be very, very persistent in your communication. Because we had a really long list of speakers not speakers, but like people we wanted to invite or organizations we wanted to like table at the symposium during lunch or host a workshop. And even we had a couple of candidates for our keynote speech. And not all of them responded, which goes to show like how important it is for you to not be deterred, because especially I was like really involved in finding these speakers, and there were some that I really wanted to like respond to us and possibly come to this event, but obviously like not all things can happen the way you want it to. And so you just have to learn how to like pick yourself up from that and just keep going, because obviously there are way more fish in the sea, and there are way more like options that are just as good, that can provide just as much input and provide just as much quality to your event. And regarding UCAN, or the Youth Climate Action Network, something I did very specifically was first like reach out to all of the connections that I had, which is also something very important. When you're being an advocate, you have to know how to really talk to people at events, get their email, get their phone number, Instagram, whatever, and be able to connect with them later when you need that connection. And so that's how I found a lot of support for UCAN. That's how I was able to connect with a lot of the people who are going to be like leading it with me, just through finding these connections once again. And that would make like almost any campaign or any project related to climate like almost for sure successful.
So we do this in a number of different ways. So I'm just gonna fly through it maybe, and that'll give you a flavor for it. There's, we're a different organization than other environmental groups, and that's fine, because folks can find a home with all the different kinds of environmental groups, and it's important to have variety. So one of the most important things I do as a group leader is we onboard new members, and that is a nurturing process in some ways, figuring out where they're most comfortable connecting with our activism, which usually reflects largely their own nature as an introvert or an extrovert. Some folks are going to be more passive, and you set up online tools and resources to allow them to do a monthly action from home that they can do in 10 minutes. That ties in with a broader initiative that's happening on the political side of our operation. These would be letters to elected officials, as an example. And others who are more extroverted, maybe they do presentations, maybe they join us for meetings with elected officials and their staff members, all around what would be tied to legislative calendars, certain legislation that we've decided to focus on. There's only 4 areas we focus on because there's a huge range of climate activism that can be done. And if you really want all your members to cover all the bases, it's super confusing. So, there's nerds amongst us that love this stuff, and we have a nerd corner that people engage, and it's fascinating if you have any bandwidth to even just take a look and see the subjects that folks navigate for each other. This happens through a medium called, I guess you call it an intro web. Sorry, I'm not the tech person, but it's for all of our members. It's an educational resource and a medium for connecting with each other locally and across the country. The last thing I would say to you guys is COVID taught us that amongst our members, there's a number of folks who are active that I never even meet as a leader in the group. And that's great too. It was kind of reassuring in some ways to find that there were activists in our very midst. But those that show up and engage and realize where their niche is in an organization is great. And also being nimble and finding the right organization for yourself, for your personal interests is super important. So that helps.
Following up on my last comment, I want to say that you don't have to be able to write legislation about energy policy to join our group. That is something I never foresaw happening. We started very basically. We all went to a training and we learned how the California legislative process works. And we learned how you talk to legislators, and people would say, oh, this is a good bill, and we'd go set up a meeting, and this is when you met in person before COVID, and we'd say, oh, this bill's really good, can you please vote yes on it? And eventually, people who more scientific and nerdy backgrounds came in, but you can be active in advocating for good climate legislation or stopping bad legislation, because there's a lot of that. And policy by signing petitions, by, showing up at, a meeting or asking your legislator, making a phone call or sending them, an email. And all of those things actually help get climate legislation passed. What I was talking about was very, very what we call inside activity. The longer that you do this kind of work and you talk to the same legislators and you start knowing who their staff is, because generally the staff stays around sometimes longer than the legislators, then you start building relationships, or people in your group build relationships. And my first meeting was like, I showed up and basically I said, oh, hi, I'm here because I'm one of your constituents and I think what they're saying is good. And all these people were like talking and I just was like, okay, yeah, sounds great. So it's also, you can draft social media things. You can, make little memes, right? You can, make graphics. There's a bunch of different things you can do for different, whatever your interests are or your time availability is and all of that. One of the good things is we meet on Zoom, so we don't, because we're a regional group. People aren't going to come in from Ventura County to talk to us about, which legislation they like. But once you become aware, and I think you all can relate to this, it sort of becomes a rabbit hole when you kind of become aware, like, oh, plastic straws are bad. Oh, wait, this is bad. There's always something more that you're learning about. But you do see results if you stick with it. And that's what's really amazing. I mean, I'm a lawyer by trade, so I can talk some of these things to some of the legislators in a certain sort of a way where, we attorneys talk to each other in certain coded language. And so I can be effective, but can I write energy policy? Oh, no, not at all. So I hope that helps mix things.
So many good nuggets of wisdom. All right, this is the last question. So I'm asking you all to dig deep. Thank you for laughing, Jeannie. So I heard a bunch of different specific tools and tactics. Surveys, getting contact information, tabling wherever you can, sending letters, joining meetings. Edric, I'm gonna adopt this concept of a nerd corner for every future dinner party I throw. I love that idea. Making phone calls, sending emails, building relationships. And the common theme that I heard amongst all four of you is, actually two themes. One, meeting people where they are, right, helps you get them involved in your particular piece of advocacy, and also acknowledging people for who they are and the talents that they bring, regardless of being an introvert or an extrovert, having charisma, not having charisma. Like, you're just meeting folks where they are and you're utilizing their natural talents to help promote your specific climate issue and climate action. So my last question for you all is, you've done this work, you've organized in schools, you've organized globally, you've organized statewide. It's exhausting work. You're still here and you're still fighting the good fight. Clearly there's something that's motivating you. Can you share with the audience what's your favorite part of this experience? What keeps you coming back?
Oh, there's so many different things. So when I was younger, like really little, I read this book. It was titled something along the lines of like, what would happen if everyone did what you did? And it goes through basically numerous scenarios where it explains, like, someone's at the park and they leave a can on the bench, and they're like, oh, it's just one can. And it basically breaks down the impact of, well, what if everyone else did this? And then it kind of shows you on the flip side, like, the impact that you can make if everyone else were to do this. And it's like, it all starts with one voice, but one voice can also lead to like this whole procession of other people contributing to this because they see you doing these negative things. So be the change and contribute to that. So I feel like after reading that and just discovering so much more about this world, it just kind of kept me like yearning for more and like wanting to know more about our planet. And like as you hear about various issues, you can't help but like not want to make an impact and like help our world, because even though one person can't do everything themselves, like you can start that trend and kind of like initiate that for other people to join in. And so I feel like that kind of keeps me going, just knowing that my voice does matter and I can inspire other people to keep going too. And it's sort of a rewarding feeling at the end, knowing that like when you've accomplished something or when you do pass something or get other people involved in something else, you can kind of like look back and be like, wow, I contributed to that. I was the change for that. And I visited this exhibit in New York. It's called Arcadia Earth. I don't know if anyone's ever been to it, but it's really cool. They make a bunch of different art from like different like recycled plastics and all these different things, and it breaks down, like you calculate your carbon footprint while you're there, and it breaks down a bunch of different things in our world, like did you know facts about our planet, this many people do this every day, but then there's a box at the bottom that shows how you can help, how one small thing can make an impact. And I feel like just understanding that one little thing can change our world, can help start the trend and change our world, just keeps me wanting to do more of that.
I love that book anecdote. That was really cool. Okay. For me, there are lots of different reasons why I love this work. And one of them, I totally agree with you. It's the feeling of having gotten something done. Earlier this year, my environmental club at my school, we had a cookie fundraiser, and it was for, I think, saving the wolves. Saving the wolves and the mountain lions. I don't know if you guys know P22, but very famous mountain lion. And so we were like donating to organizations that were in that field. And so we actually raised like, I think like $800, which was a really rewarding feeling, knowing that like we just did this out of, well, constantly advertising this fundraiser, selling cookies, and it was just an amazing feeling for me. And the other part is definitely the people, because before this, I never really had a lot of people in my life that were as committed to making change as the people that I found through climate advocacy. And it's this feeling of community when you know that you found people who share your vision, who are just as impassioned as you to make a difference in this world. like that feeling is just like, wow. And that just keeps me like wanting to keep like joining different organizations and like doing this and doing that. And honestly, I just love it. Thank you.
So, I just say, for me, it helps to have a role model in your life. So I was lucky enough to have a mother who's a human rights activist, and you see it, observe it, and are compelled by it. Sometimes that just happens. Doesn't have to be a mother. I was just lucky that way, guys. But it could be a neighbor, somebody at church. Inspiration comes from unexpected, often serendipitous moments for each of us. The other thing is, as a group leader, you end up engaging with all these different folks, is seeing a light bulb go off for somebody else, knowing that they have found a place, which is in parallel with something that happened for me 13 years ago. Dating myself a bit, yes, I know. But it is, it is important to connect with others, that there is a connection, there's a social aspect of this that's really important. And then there's, finally, there's this, there's a piece about our own anxiety and tempering our own worry-wart nature or whatever by doing something. And activism itself is a solution psychologically in that way for me. And it's a lot better than, than going out for a drink every time, okay? that can compound things a bit. But I think that's a nutshell on what I find for motivation and such.
This is a really super deep question. For me, since I was a child, I was called to feel that it was important to care for the earth. And that was something that I felt on a deeply spiritual level. And for this kind of work, there's a clean slate every legislative session. So, you go through legislative session, there's some really good bills, they never go anywhere. There's some bills that, get passed and get watered down, or Governor Newsom, who's not really an environmental champion, vetoes them. But you start, every year fresh, and that really helps keep me motivated. Also, working with 350 groups, this is not a partisan group, it's not a Democrat group, right? We all know it wouldn't be a Republican one, but to be honest with you, I'm not a Democrat, I'm a socialist, so, I want to be in a space where I feel like the work I'm doing matters, and it doesn't matter that I'm not in one of those two major parties. So that also, motivates me, and the more I learn about environmental issues and why we have them, the more it influences the way I view, our whole system, our whole capitalist system. And so I feel like this is a place where I can, and I know that I've made a change. I know that I've had effects, and I'm not nearly as involved as some of, we have very nerdy people in the environmental movement, thank God for that. But I feel like I'm making a difference, and like I said, it can be kind of depressing at times, but you get a clean slate, at least with legislative work, so thank you.
I don't know if y'all can feel it out there. I'm feeling the energy up here. It's palpable. Thank you all for the incredible work that you do. I'm going to repeat myself back from the top. Decisions are made by those who show up persistently. So for each of you, thank you for showing up persistently. Let's give a round of applause, y'all.